Good afternoon. My name is Tom Cassidy. I'm enjoying a couple of hours of vacation this afternoon. Fully tolerant city. Nonetheless, we're not without our problems. And my best evidence of this is the 34 crimes that have been reported in the past 5 years to the Lincoln Police Department in which a victim was targeted due to his or her perceived sexual preference or gender identity. I think that's the tip of the iceberg. Most of these crimes are never reported to the police. Now, personally, I don't believe that people choose their sexual identity any more than they choose their hair color or their eye color. That if we had a robbery and 3 cases of threats and 14 vandalisms and 17 assaults that targeted people with green eyes or red hair, we'd be trying to come up with some way to reduce the chance that redheads and the green-eyed were targeted for these kinds of crimes. I think that's what this ordinance does, and I want to explain why. I think you're all reasonably familiar with the broken windows theory of crime. Take care of the small stuff, you're also going to prevent the big stuff. I think when you enact an ordinance like this, you're defining in clear terms the limits of behavior that we find tolerable in Lincoln, and by outlawing minor forms of discrimination and intolerance, you're also making it less likely that more serious forms of intolerance will occur. In 1993, I was the sheriff of Lancaster County when 2 men came from Topeka, Kansas to visit our city, Clifford Pravat and Troy Ledger. They came here explicitly to find a gay man to rob and terrorize, and they did so rather effectively. At a Lincoln bar, they met a gay man, 50-year-old Harold Grover. He was a longtime employee, a sales clerk at Dillard's department store. And they lured Mr. Grover away from the bar where they met to Branstoke Lake. There, these 2 men beat him, kicked him, slit his throat, strangled him, ultimately stabbed him. And then they dumped his body. I believe an ordinance like this is a small step, a very small step. But it's a step towards making Lincoln an infertile ground for the attitudes that nurture the mindset of these 2 murderers and for all those other people whose own moral conscience is so weak and debased that they judge people by their characteristics rather than by their character. Thank you.
Question, Mr. Cassidy. Please, Carl.
Yes, thank you, Director Cassidy. Appreciate your being here. Wonder if you have any thoughts in terms of what message such an ordinance might send to younger persons, juveniles, and their roles.
Well, let me answer that by way of an analogy. There's a behavior that's illegal. It was outlawed sometime, I think in the late dozens of times. Councilman Camp has seen it. Councilman Carroll has seen it. Council Member Shimmick has seen it. But I don't think that I've seen it. I'm not sure about you, to tell the truth.
We're the same age.
And you've seen it dozens of times, too, in all likelihood. And it's illegal. I don't think anyone's ever been arrested for it. But something happened that changed this behavior. And I think it was a change in norms and values, and the law was simply reflecting that. And you're probably wondering what this behavior is. Smoking on an elevator. I think we could find other examples of that, where the law was one step among many that changed a climate. I think about how attitudes in this community have changed towards things like domestic violence and drunk driving and child abuse and neglect during my tenure as a police officer here in Lincoln. It's just been huge and dramatic change, and I think that an ordinance like this is one of those bricks in the wall that helps to create that change. There are lots of people in Lincoln that I respect and admire, worked with, have laid my life on the line with, and had protect mine that are protected from discrimination by this ordinance, and I stand here in defense of their rights as citizens in this community.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, sir, for being here today.
Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council, my name is Ben Gray. I'm not from Lincoln. I live in Omaha, and I'm going to preface my remarks by saying, first of all, when I listened to Sister Cooper and Sheriff Cassidy, I was wondering why I signed up, because I just needed to go home, because after they finished, this is a no-brainer, and it should be a no-brainer for you all on the council. Secondly, I guess it could be arguably said that I'm the guy that started all this. But let me go ahead and I want to address a few things, first of all. First, the argument that this is a choice. I've given information to several of you on the council, and hopefully it's been disseminated, but I gave you information that all of the medical, psychological, and sociological organizations have all taken a stand on this, and all of them have agreed unanimously that they cannot find any substance that says this is a choice. And there will always be dissenters to anything. There will be dissenters on this council from time to time, dissenters in the legislature, but the vast majority of those bodies have said they can find no evidence that this is a choice. And in addition to that, I think this council has an obligation to apply a modicum of common sense. Would you, for example, think it's okay to be treated because you choose to be a certain way? If you choose that, how do you feel like people can say to you the kinds of things that people say to these people? Do gay, lesbians, transgender, bisexual people choose to be ridiculed, choose to be scorned, choose to be done in all of their lives? I mean, do they choose to do that? I think a modicum of common sense has to take place here when we're looking at the issue of choice and whether in fact or not it is a choice. Secondly, there are people that will say to you, that may say to you today, that said to me during our public hearing, that somehow that these individuals, that there's going to be extensive litigation. We've looked at over 163 cities and 21 states. There has been no substantial increase in litigation at all from any of those organizations. Others will also tell you that you are creating a protected class. The class already exists. You're just providing protection for a class that already exists. You're not creating anything. The fact of the matter is, ladies and gentlemen, as I look at this, and as I looked at it when I introduced the legislation in Omaha, I see this as an economic issue, and I also see it as a constitutional issue. But I see it more as a constitutional issue than anything else. We all took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of this state against all enemies, foreign and domestic. In that instance, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution is absolutely crystal clear. Those who are born or naturalized in this country have the right to life, liberty, and property with due process and equal protection. We have an obligation as elected officials to make sure that occurs for every citizen in this community. We have to do this. This is something that, as I looked at it, and as we began to look at it, and all of the red herrings, and all of the scare tactics, the people in the bathrooms, and all of that foolishness, we have not seen a single case of the 163 cities and 21 states where that has ever been an issue. Ever. So if that's not the case, and all of these are just simply scare tactics, and you've listened to Sister Cooper and Sheriff Cassidy, who put it better than I think I probably ever could, this is a no-brainer, ladies and gentlemen. We have an obligation to move forward and provide the protections necessary. This is also an economic issue. The fact of the matter is that we have sparse population in the state of Nebraska.
1 minute,
and
sir.
we don't have, and we don't need to use the term luxury, but we don't have the luxury of saying some people in our state are not welcome while others are. In Omaha, in Lincoln, we are going to compete against each other from time to time for business. I'm hoping that we win most of those fights, but I know we're probably not. But at the end of the day, we ought to be the cities that say intolerance is unacceptable in our cities. This legislation is important, it is necessary, and if you listen to the testimony of those who speak passionately about it, it is...
Adam.
Thank you very much. You present some great arguments, and you've obviously gone through this battle for a lot. Yeah, just a little bit. So thanks for coming down here. We really appreciate it, and you've got a lot of insight. I'm curious, you have such great arguments about it. Was there a reason that you, in Omaha, didn't try to put it on the ballot?
You don't usually put human rights issues on the ballot. I mean, it would have been, let's think for a minute if we had attempted to put civil rights on the ballot, or if we had attempted to put voting rights on the ballot, or some of these other human rights issues, if we had attempted to place those on the ballot, what the outcome would have been. there are two opportunities and two ways to go. You can put it on the ballot, but then that takes the obligation off of you. We took an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States. And in that oath, it means that we are duty-bound to protect all of our citizens no matter what. And in that context, we have an obligation to do it. Now, if someone starts an initiative or some sort of effort to put it on the ballot, we can't control that. But we as elected officials have an obligation to do what we were sworn to do when we took office.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We actually have, and since you guys took that vote, there's actually been the Attorney General's opinion that says that in order to uphold the Constitution of the state of Nebraska, we're not permitted to vote on this. We're struggling with this issue that we want to fulfill our duties under the state constitution, our city charter, and the U.S. Constitution, and we've been told by people that in order to fulfill those duties, we have to put it on the ballot. This AG's opinion came after you guys had a chance to vote on it, but do you sense the conflict that exists between trying to do what you think what you're suggesting, and then also trying to do something which we're being told is in direct contradiction to the state constitution?
With all due respect, City Councilman, I think the conflict lies in the Attorney General's office. I don't think it lies anywhere else. I think it is clear that the cities of Lincoln and Omaha have the right to do this. I think it has been upheld by the Supreme Court that we have the right to do this. I don't think that. I think for an individual, I think we've got to be realistic, and I think we've got to look through and look past all the red herrings here. Now, allegedly, an opinion was asked for last Wednesday by a state senator, and he got his opinion that Friday morning. I mean, do we really think that they offered an opinion that quickly? Do we really think that for some other reason that this is something other than some sort of a political issue that someone is trying to raise to thwart us or throw us off of the path of doing what we know is absolutely right and absolutely available to us by law? But more importantly, it is the fairest thing we could do.
Thank you very much.
Any questions? Diana?
I just want to thank you for coming down and thank you for all your work on this issue. You hung in there and you eventually got it done. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I have a hard time calling you councilwoman instead of senator, but thank you very much for that.
Yes, thank you again for being here and with us on this. I wanted to ask you specifically about the religious exemption as it applied in the Omaha Ordinance. How did that come about, and what did Omaha do specifically?
Well, there were two reasons. I mean, there were two issues that came about as a result of churches asking for it. But more importantly, as I looked at the Constitution, I felt like we would be running the risk of litigation if we didn't do it, because in the religious community has a certain set of beliefs, and they are protected under the First Amendment of the Constitution. If we somehow interject ourselves into those beliefs strongly held, whether you agree or disagree, but if those beliefs are strongly held by certain members of the church community, we have an obligation to protect their right to practice their religion as they see fit. So we had to craft the law in such a way where churches themselves and properties that they own are exempted. Now, if an individual wants to start a business and he's a member of a certain church, he does not have that protection. He or she has an obligation to operate under the laws of the city of Lincoln, the city of Omaha, and the state of Nebraska.
Okay. Thank you.
John?
Mr. Gray, appreciate your coming. You talked a little bit about some constitutional measures, and you cited the 14th Amendment.
Yes.
You just now referred to the First Amendment. How do you reconcile the First Amendment with the 14th Amendment?
I don't think you need to reconcile them. If we exempt the churches, there's no reconciliation that's necessary. They're protected. They're taken care of as long as it's their property, as long as it's items that they own. They have the right to, if they choose to, discriminate against certain groups, Lutherans, Presbyterians, gay and lesbian people, so forth and so on, if that's what they choose to do. So I don't see any reconciliation as necessary. We protected their rights under the Constitution by exempting them. We upheld the rights of those who are in the LGBT community by providing the protections necessary in the workplace and in public accommodations for them. There's no conflict in my judgment.
In the 14th Amendment that you cited, it talks about depriving or having life, liberty, and limb.
And property with due process and equal protection,
with the due
yes.
process. So it talks about due process there.
Yes.
So aren't we changing that due process in a religious context?
I don't see that we're changing it. One lady that came before me argued that when you give someone else rights, you're taking away rights from some other organization or some other group. I don't see that as the case in this particular instance because we protected the rights of the church and allowed the exemptions. And with the LGBT community, we upheld their rights to be protected in the workplace, to be protected in public accommodations, except for those where there is a religious preference. I don't see that there is a conflict.
I'm just looking at that. I mean, it just seems like we almost shouldn't be exempting the religious ones because that flies.
Well, I find it strange that churches think it's okay to discriminate, but if that's what they want to do, that's up to them. I just think that just in terms of looking at a critical look at the Constitution says to me that if there is, and there may not be, and you've seen a number of churches that don't think that it's okay. There were 24 of them that signed on today for you all to pass this ordinance. So that the churches themselves don't even agree in some instances. But for those who want that preference, I think we are duty bound by the Constitution to provide that preference for them, but at the same time protecting the rights of citizens in the workplace and in public accommodations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you all.